the motivation, and I remarked that if you set the motivation early in the morning, it should last the whole day. It shouldn't wear out. That you don't have to constantly say it. But one point in the I don't know how you do it in English, but Sangye-chun and Soki-chonam-la, the to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. You have to be. If you look at the term that's in there, it's not until awakening or enlightenment. I go to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until the term is Bodhi. And Bodhi is the state of either a Shravaka Arhat, a Pratyeka Buddha Arhat, or a Bodhisattva Arhat. So refuge is in common for all, for both Theravada and Mahayana. Not really nice to say Theravada, but for the Shravakas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, and the Bodhisattvas. And then the second two lines are for Mahayana, for Bodhicitta. So this, this Circum Rinpoche explained when he was very young. He explained to me that, because he always think that both lines are for Mahayana. So anyway, just as a small little fact to add, a factoid, I thought to explain a few other factoids before we start, because I'm a bit of a fanatic when it comes to terminology and getting things precise. So there are a few issues. One is ignorance. Ignorance, I think, is a term which is needs precision, since this is what we want to get rid of, and is quite vaguely understood. So if you look in the what the Nalanda masters say about it, there are two views that developed historically. One is before Dharmakirti and one is after Dharmakirti. Before Dharmakirti is what you find in Vasubandhu and Asanga in the Abhidharma texts. And this is Buddhapalita in the quote that we had. He comes before Dharmakirti, about a century before. So he still follows the initial view. And the initial view of it is the definition of it. It's the mental factor that basically stupefies the mind. It puts the mind in darkness. That's why he says, obscured by the darkness of the eye of, I translate that word as naivety, sense of just, you don't know. It is what causes the mental block. That's why it's an obscuration. It's the mental block preventing you from knowing and understanding the Four Noble Truths, is how it is defined. Then when Dharmakirti comes along, Dharmakirti says that, yes, this is the basis. It is what puts the mind in darkness, so that makes the block for understanding. And he makes it equivalent to the this difficult term to translate, the deluded view toward the perishing aggregates. He says that it's equivalent to that. So if you want to I've changed the terminology, of course. For the first view, it's anti-knowing. It is what prevents you, what is against being able to understand the Four Noble Truths. And then for Dharmakirti, it's misknowing. So it's based on misinformation that you get from the non-Buddhist schools, and you believe it, or there's an automatically arising form of it. So this deluded attitude toward the perishing aggregates is that there is an Atman, which is defined in many different, many different levels, but that the Atman then is either identical to one of the aggregates, so, I'm my mind, I'm my body, something like that, or that it enters into the aggregates and sort of like some sort of alien thing controls it or possesses it or has it as its habitat. And we recognize that there's an automatically arising form of that because it seems as though there's me talking in my head. So, it automatically appears like that. So this is what Dharmakirti says is ignorance. So he defines it in that way. And in the Prasangika school, that's equivalent to self-grasping as well. Whereas in the before Dharmakirti, these are separate mental factors, separate items. So just, yeah. It is equivalent to that according to Dharmakirti. Well, now we get into more detail. The more detail is that you have a subcategory. The jigda is a subcategory of the larger term, and the larger term is this word naivety, moha. That's the larger term, and the ignorance is, because there are several ways of explaining it, but basically that you have why don't we take it this way, that you have a general level of ignorance which is accompanying all of the disturbing, not only the disturbing states, but all states, of both constructive and destructive states of mind have ignorance as part of it, according to Dharmakirti. Before that, especially in Vasubandhu, it only accompanies destructive states of mind. So you have that difference. I didn't want to make it as complicated as it could be, as it could become, but you have general ignorance, but then you have the ignorance which is identified as this deluded attitude. And that's the main ignorance that one wants to focus on, because then Chandrakirti says that this is actually the root of samsara, and so on. So then that becomes identified with the first link of dependent arising. So, but it gets more and more complicated the more that you delve into it. But just a general, understanding of what we're talking about ignorance is that it's the mental block. And that's why in order to overcome the mental block, you need to build up a lot of positive force, so-called merit. That is what will break through that darkening of the eye of wisdom of discriminating. So that was one thing that I wanted to describe. And another thing is my pet peeve, which is the difference between emptiness and voidness. Emptiness works perfectly well for the non-prasangika schools. Emptiness implies that there is a container, a glass, and the glass is empty. And so in the non-prasangika schools, they assert self-established existence, that so-called inherent existence, and then it is devoid of truly established existence or whatever. You know, they have, each school has its, each tenet system has its own presentation. But there is something that is, you know, empty or you know, missing on the deepest level, something else. So that's emptiness. That works perfectly well for these other schools. For Prasangika, there's no container left. You know, the truly established existence is refuted both on the in deepest truth and in conventional truth. So the actual word shunya is the same word as zero in Sanskrit. So it means no such thing. So I like to make that differentiation just to make things clear. Use emptiness with the non-Prasangika schools and voidness with Prasangika itself. But I'm picky when it comes to that. The other thing that I wanted to explain is mental labeling. This is, or conceptual labeling. There are different aspects of that, different levels of that. If we don't take it, you know, I mean, you can take it on the Prasangika level that everything is how you establish the existence of things is in terms of conceptual labeling. Not talking about that. Let's put that to the aside. Just the actual word that is used as it's usually translated as imputation. This is the word that I want to deal with, because in English the word imputation doesn't mean very much, and so what this is referring to is three different things. First of all, you have what is the type of phenomenon. You know, when you talk about impermanent or non-static phenomenon, there's forms of physical phenomenon, ways of knowing something, and then the third category, which is neither one or the other, the so-called I call them non-congruent affecting variables. They don't have the five things congruent with consciousness and the mental factors, and they affect what we experience. So, and those are, according to the Sautrantika explanation, these are objective facts about things. So it is objective that, you know, that in order to, well, let me clarify that. I should have sprayed my throat. I'm a little bit out of breath, which is causing me to speak like this. If you look at the Sanskrit word, for this type of phenomenon, what's translated as imputed, is something that you are caused to know by something else. Now, actually, I have an asthma spray which will do the thing, not something like that. So if you excuse me. So good. My fix. All right, that's a little bit better. Now, the Sanskrit words means something that in order to know it, you're caused to know it by something else. The Tibetan term has the connotation of something that's tied to something else. And so, for instance, age is tied to something that it's the age of. So in order to know the age of something, you have to know that something. So similarly, from this is objective reality, according to Sautrantika, that the person is tied to aggregates. And in order to know a person, well, first of all, a person cannot exist separately from aggregates. So this is this Atman idea that, a self exists separately from the aggregates and is inside and controlling it and living inside it. So it's not like that. It's tied to it. It can't exist separately from it. And it can only be known by knowing the aggregates. First, the aggregates, I see a body, and then I see the person, the body and the person at the same time. So that's one meaning of that word that's used for imputation, and it should not be confused with what's called conceptual labeling or mental labeling. But as conceptual, I think that is better to use that word, because then it underlies the fact that when we talk about these objective things like age or person, that can be seen non-conceptually. When we talk about conceptual labeling, that's only conceptual. It's optional. The other one is not optional. There's a person, period. But it's optional whether we think in terms of concepts, which are basically categories. And so you have an object category, let's say mother, my mother, and then you have a member of that category or set. So in order to see my mother, I don't have to think in terms of, it's my mother. But if I'm going to think in terms of my mother, that category of my mother every time that I see her, that's conceptual labeling. And then designation is that there's a word or a name, which is just an arbitrary set of sounds that a conventional group have agreed upon that has meaning, that then is designated on the category, and then through the category on the members of the category. So there are these three meanings of the same word in Tibetan and Sanskrit, which is why it's so confusing. So we have, objectively something is tied to something else, like a person. Then we have conceptual labeling of, what category do they fall into? How do we think about them? And then there's designation with a word or a name. So we have these three. When it's used in Prasangika, then it's in terms of everything is dependent on a basis in general. Then explain it in more detail than that. So get that general idea. So this is what we mean when we use imputation. It has many different meanings. And it's important not to get confused, to think that, a person is, or the self, it's optional. Whether, it's imputed or not, it's not optional. It's objective fact, according to Sautrantiga, and I think that whether we think of it as objective reality with all the connotations of that we want to refute, objective reality, actually the definition is that it exists the moment before it's perceived. And the whole Chittamatra critique of that is, how do you know it exists before it's perceived? You can't know that it can't be established or proven that it exists before you see it, before it's perceived or a photograph of it or whatever. How do you know there's food in the refrigerator? You only know it if you open up the door and look. You can't prove that there is there. So it is a valid critique, the Chittamatra position. All of them are valid. As the old Circle Rinpoche said, don't be so arrogant to think that they're stupid. It's not stupid people who, including the non-Buddhist tenet systems. They're very intelligent explanations of and consistent within themselves of reality. So then the other thing to explain is what we mean by, now we get into conceptual labeling, that things exist merely in terms of conceptual labeling. And what do we mean by that? And in order to understand that, we have to put together two complicated things. One is how conceptual cognition works, and the other is how conceptual labeling works. Put those two together, because they're talking about the same thing. Hang on, this is complicated, so forewarned. When we talk about what is conceptual cognition is cognition through a category. Sometimes that's called generality or universal or so on, but I think category is closer to what it is actually referring to. There is an object category, and book, cup, there's a category of cup, and there are many members of that category that would fit into that category. My mother. So there are many, moments with her and aspects of her, and so that would fit into that category of my mother. Then there are audio categories, which are, if you think about it, it's quite extraordinary how you could have the word mother and it could be pronounced any way, with any volume, in any voice, and it all fits into that audio category, and we understand it as, they're saying the same word. Extraordinary how that works. So these are audio categories, and the object category is also, by the same word, the meaning category that is associated with the audio category. And it's designated with a word or a name. Okay, so what is a category? A category is an implicative negation phenomenon, so-called affirming negation phenomenon. It is, what is it, when we talk about a category? So a category is, when you talk about a negation phenomenon, an implicative one, it is when it has negated its object, it leaves in its footprint both a negation phenomenon and an affirmation phenomenon. So, the category is nothing other than the category. That's how it's defined. It's this double negative. So you exclude everything that's not in the category. How do you define the category? If you exclude everything that's not in the category, it's what's left over. Because you don't want to make any positive assertion of anything. So things are defined in terms of negatives, negation. So when you exclude everything that's not in the category, then you're left with the category. So what does that, what's left in the footprint of that after you've made that you've excluded? So what's left in it is nothing, nothing other than what's in this category. So that's, it's itself. And it has also thrown into its footstep a positive thing, which is a member of the category. Otherwise, it's a null set, it doesn't have any members. So it leaves a member of the category, and the member of the category is this word, which is a difficult word because it's the word that means appearance. And the appearance is just the word appear, you can't think of it in terms of visual. It's just something that arises in the conceptual thought. So a member of the category is a generic member of the category. If I think of the category dog, then there would be, the category is static, it doesn't change, it doesn't grow organically, and the member of the category, a generic member of the category, dog, is also static. So that becomes confusing because it's the word appearance. But that is also static, it's generic. So when we talk about mental labeling, you have the label, which is the category, or the word that's designated on it, and what it's referring to is a member of the category. That is the referent object. Now, how do we think about it? We think about it, you need to have a representation of that generic form, of the generic member of the category, a dog. So Sautrantika doesn't have these imaginary forms that you can think, that can appear in thought. So then it becomes a little bit awkward in Sautrantika. But if we leave it with everything else, the others, specifically Chittamatra, Svatantrika, and Madhyamaka, Prasangika, I should say, then they have these 5 types of forms that can just appear in the mind. So we include in that imaginary form. So you imagine a dog that represents to you what a dog is. Or memory works the same way. I think of my mother. Well, each time that I think of her, there's a different mental image that represents my mother. Okay, now look at that mental image. Well, all that it is, if it's a visual one, is a visual representation of the front of a dog. Not the back of the dog, the front of the dog. Right? So, and it's not the smell of the dog, it's not the sound of the dog, it's just one sense quality and part of that sense quality, if it's visual. That's the basis of imputation. So it would be, if I think of my mother, it could be form aggregate of what she looks like, but again, only what the front of her looks like or her face looks like. It's not three-dimensional, seeing the back. So this is the basis for imputation. Okay, now we'll get a little bit further in that dissection of what's going on. But the problem is that it seems as though, according to the other schools, non-prasangika, the defining characteristic of the category is also in the member of the category and in the basis. Otherwise, how could that represent a member of the category? How could that represent my mother? So there has to this is what is when you have the Svatantrika view, it's not just the category being labeled onto a member of the category and a representation of it. It's that the defining characteristic of the category is also on the side of that member and what represents it. And an interesting way to illustrate this is if you have a series of photographs of yourself from infant up until now, how do you know that they're all photographs of me? What in it signifies that it's me, especially when it's a baby? So there is nothing on the side of the basis of what we're calling me that establishes it that it's me. It's conceptually labeled as fitting in the category of me. So that's where we get this, grasping that either the essential nature of what it is or the defining characteristic of what it is, what it represents, is on the side of the basis. Okay, now we have, you follow so far, I hope. Okay, now you have what's called the implied object. And the implied object, Tsongkhapa differentiates, and he says that there is the implied object of what it is, and the implied object, because it appears as though there's three things. The defining characteristic of the category, of what's being labeled is in the basis of labeling. So it appears as though that's there. The essential nature, there is an essential nature, simply in terms of, making it an individual item. I mean, no, the essential nature is making it what it is, conventionally. Self-nature, it just makes it an existent item, an individual item. So you have these technical terms in Tibetan. They have different connotations. They're not all nature. So things do have a defining characteristic, otherwise you couldn't distinguish one thing from another thing. They do have a self-nature, which makes them an individual item. I mean, if you think about it, take things down to force fields and subatomic particles and so on, there's no clear defining, like plastic around anything that makes it into a thing. But there are things function. So there is a self-nature. Point being that it's not something that has the power to establish, what it is. And then there is an essential nature, which is what was translated as essence, which is what the essential nature, like you were saying, of the water in the stream, stays, its essential nature is that it's water. So conventionally things are like that, but it doesn't have the power to establish it. So implied object. So it seems as though there's two layers. There's what something is, dog, and what is, its mode of existence. It's truly established as a dog. Is truly it. The implied object is a conventional object. Conventional object is also called a well-known in the world object. So it can be known as a common sense object. A common sense object is not just the visual information of the front of the body. It's the whole body with all the all the visual information, the information from all the senses. And that endures through time, that there's a continuity of it. That's the conventional object. That's the implied object. So that's why, when what's unique about Prasangika is that when you see just the visual information of the body, you're seeing the whole person, you're seeing the whole body, you're seeing the whole object. The non-Galupas say no, that the whole object is just a mental construct, conceptual construct. But Tsongkhapa says no, you have to say conventionally you see common sense, a person, a body, and so on. It makes it much easier to have compassion for others. So there's that. So that is the mere conventionality, he calls it. But the implied object of that self-established existence, that doesn't exist. There's no such thing. Now, the problem, what then happens, what is the case, is that the two meld together. And so what you imagine is that there is the conventional object which is self-established. And that, there's a technical term for that, that's called a referent thing, not the referent object, but a referent thing. And when you grasp for inherent existence or self-established existence, that's what you're grasping for. And that is when they say that the focal support of your cognition falls away, that's the focal support. That what you imagine is that referent thing, that actually truly established whole object. It's not like that. So that is what you are aimed at, the focal object. That's what you are seeing. And you imagine that what's supporting that is a truly established thing. And that falls away when you understand that that's not referring to anything real. So there's a difference between, so it's complex, but that is, on a more detailed level, what so-called inherent existence, self-established existence. So there's a self-nature, but it's not a self-establishing nature. So this word establish is very important. When you talk about different ways of existing, and that we're refuting ways of existing, well, that's not quite what it is. What we're refuting are ways of proving that something exists. How do you establish that something exists? It's the word siddha, it's not the word existence, it's the word drup. To exist, to establish, to prove something, what affirms something. So what affirmed, because it was discussed, today and yesterday, that what affirms that something exists is that it produces an effect. This is what the lower schools say. That proves that it exists. Or because I see it, that proves that it exists. And we can only see it if it's a solid, if it's, what I conceive of it, that it's actually referring to a thing. A solid thing. And it's only solid things that can do anything. So this is their position. So what you're refuting is impossible ways of establishing that things exist. That this doesn't establish, this doesn't prove that it exists. So in terms of conceptual labeling, the only thing that establishes that it exists, that it functions, is, well, there is a conventional category that, things don't exist in categories. That's just a convenient way of making sense of the, of what we experience. How do you make sense of it? Well, you put things together. Emotions. Well, emotions don't have dividing lines and boxes. The difference between loving someone and liking someone. What's the boundary? Well, that's a convention. There's a convention in the dictionary. We have our own personal conventions for that. How you divide that, it's different with different partners, with different people. It's a convention. And there are members. So that's the category. And there's a member of the category, and that's it. That is how you establish that there is such a thing as love. Love functions. We experience it. But it's not, it's not that there's an emotion over here that has the tag on it that it's called love, and now I plug into it and I'm experiencing it. It's just a convenient way of expressing things so that we can communicate and understand and make sense of our experience. So that's how you establish that there are what we've divided into words, what we call words. And different cultures divide things differently, define things differently. And that's fine. So that's mental labeling, conceptual labeling. How you establish things are a book, a table, and so on. Okay? So I just wanted to explain, a few of the basic things that maybe are not so clear. I saved a few for tomorrow. Leave some time for questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Berzin. So for me, as a lay practitioner, the Dharma is nothing if not practical. So I appreciate your explanations, and it's given me a lot to think about. What can you recommend in practical terms for using dependent origination as a way to counter the negative afflictions in our lives?
Well, I spoke about categories and words. So let's use the category problem. There's a situation, and we can conceptually label it a problem. And so, okay, it is a problem, conventionally. We lost our job, or we fell sick, or whatever the problem might be. We broke up with our partner, or whatever. And if you deconstruct it and see, well, it's a convenient way of referring to the situation, but it's made up of parts, and each moment there was something different that was happening, and there were circumstances and causes for why I lost my job, etc. When you think in terms of, here is this monster, this is a problem, you basically make a big deal out of it. As Rinpoche was saying, you make a big scene out of it, a drama out of it, and then because it's, you've made it into a solid thing, then you can really be depressed about it and, be angry about it, resent, why did this, and think, poor me, why has this happened to me? You go on this whole trip about it when you understand that conceiving of it as a big problem is the problem. You know, what you want to do is to basically accept reality, to see reality and accept it instantly, without exaggerating it, without making it a big deal. See that it has arisen from causes, conditions. I'm calling it a problem because that's a way of understanding it and communicating it, but it has arisen from causes and conditions, and if I can analyze clearly, I see what is it that I can do, and then just do it. What is it that I can't do, so don't feel upset about that I can't do, that I can't change it. You know, I mean, that's in the, you know, AA program, you know, and stuff like that. That's common sense. Yeah, and just do it. Just do it. You know, don't make a drama out of anything. Rinpoche used to use the expression, nothing special. You know, no matter what happens, you know, that's samsara. It goes up and down. What do you expect? So that's the practical application of this. It helps you to not make a big deal out of anything and then not to overreact. Yeah.
Is it on? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Berzin. I'm thinking about this power, this labeling that you've been talking about. And I had an experience, and I think I'm getting this right. I was driving down the road about a year ago out in the country, and I think what I do when I'm driving is I glance around and everything's already in a box. Mm-hmm. Everything's already in a category. There's a tree, there's a beam, there's you, people, there's all this. I saw something that I couldn't put in a category, something unexpected. It was a moose on its knees under an apple tree, mm-hmm. eating apples. And I could not, it took me a minute or two to put it in a category. And it was terrifying, right? I mean, it just overwhelmed my thinking, right? And so I'm wondering how much of my day-to-day existence is simply, categories seem sort of almost lazy, right? Because, I mean, they're necessary, I think,
yeah.
But they also keep me from thinking about things.
Right, you put in boxes, mental boxes.
I put them in boxes, and then I don't have, as soon as I said, oh, it's a moose under an apple tree on its knees, it was like, then I didn't have to think about it anymore, right? And I could go on to the next thing.
And also it can go the other way of being judgmental.
Sure. You should clean up their apples. But
keep their moose tied up.
Keep their moose tied up, right? But what it's got me wondering a little bit is how much I do that with, I just put things in a box. And then I don't have to think about them anymore.
And we put ourselves in a box.
Absolutely. Probably just the same. Right?
And then very judgmental.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. You have to get the microphone over. Oh, you have two.
Okay, thank you. Throughout your talk, you've sort of mixed in whether these concepts are initiated by individuals or communities, such as in designation, and you said it's an understanding by a group of people. It's a common knowledge that's applied, and so I would say social. I don't know if that's even a word that it would apply here, but I was wondering if you could sort of to speak a little more to help me understand what is individually driven and socially driven in the use of all of these terms.
Well, socially driven, that's a later development. You know, I was thinking much more basically of the prehistoric people who invented language. And, you know, how did language begin? And, you know, there are certain conventions that a group will agree upon. How they agreed upon it, I don't know. But you have this in monkey societies, various animal societies, that they have, ways of communicating to each other that they all understand. So language is just sounds, arbitrary sounds that somehow people, grunts were assigned a meaning, and maybe they taught it to their children, or I have no idea how language actually developed. Then you get much more sophisticated, evolution of language, and you get dictionaries. And, the younger generation comes up with new words, that are then added to the dictionary. And they somehow, through social media or whatever, have agreed on a new word. So it evolves.
Some of, for example, the categories that you spoke about and other classifications can be driven individually or
well, individually,
mostly relying on our group knowledge, but then fine-tuned individually.
Well, individually, I'm thinking more of my individual, I use the example of who I like and who I love. That's quite individual, even though there's a definition in the dictionary.
Well, I don't know if there's, every morning we go through the consonants and vowels of our speech, and as well as the dependent arising.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often wondered whether, why are we paying so much attention to these consonants and vowels? And I've wondered whether speech in and of itself plays some role that I have no clue about in understanding emptiness or along the path to understanding emptiness.
Well,
Is there any connection, I guess, between saying those vowels and consonants and being reminded, other than just mind your mouth for the day? Or is there something beyond that, that sound and speech have some higher protocol, or I don't know. I'm not even sure.
Okay, there are two questions there. I mean, several questions that are involved there. In just put one level aside, which is that sound plays a very important role in Indian philosophy because of the eternal sound of Om, from the Vedas. So in the West, we always think of body and mind. In Indian philosophy, it's always body, speech, and mind. So that's coming out of, ancient Indian Vedic philosophy. So that is not usually what we would think of in asking the question, but why it is so prominent in the Buddhist sphere as an Indian philosophy. I think the main, to tie the vowels and consonants to dependent arising and voidness, is that speech, which is a way of communicating with with others and for understanding what is going on in our experience, that when you talk about words, words are dependent on vowels and consonants. So it's not that the word, from its side has a meaning, but the word, just as things arise from parts, likewise words are dependent on parts, on vowels and consonants. So it's one level of dependent arising. Also, what you do it with is the Sanskrit alphabet. And the Sanskrit alphabet is the sacred. I'm sorry, because now I'm thinking historically, and you don't really want to lecture on the history of Sanskrit. So I will refrain from that. But it is considered the holy language of the Orthodox Indians of central India, put it that way. North central India. There were others who disagreed.
My question is about the various schools. So I understand
About which school?
the various schools, the
Yeah.
different tenet systems. So I understand that which school you follow depends on your reaction to understanding dependent origination. That to me makes sense. But even before then, how do you start investigating the schools at all to really kind of wrap your head around them?
You need to study them. That's the only way. And as in learning new languages, only do one at a time. Don't try to learn two new languages at the same time, and don't try to learn two tenet systems at the same time. And start from the most basic, Vaibhashika. The Vaibhashika, I mean, it's very interesting. Rinpoche explained to me that in the Geshe training program, Vaibhashika is studied last. And the reason, Abhidharma is studied last. And the reason for that is so that, you will not become attached to it, that you are so well based in Madhyamaka that you won't be stolen away by the Vaibhashika system, because I've done a lot of very detailed study of the Vaibhashika system in an analysis that I've been doing on karma, and it's an incredible system. I mean, if you really get into it, it's extraordinary in its explanations of things and how much closer it is to science. The science explanation, especially about perception, than the other tenet systems. So that's why it was put last in the Geshe program, that you won't be stolen away by its view. But start with that. And then everything is, especially in terms of the two truths and selflessness and so on, it builds from that. That's one level of understanding, and then you refine from that. What is very important is in going deeper and deeper in the tenet systems, that you refute something and then see what's left over. And that is going to be, what is going to be refuted by the next system, and see what's left over from that. And that's the way that you go deeper. Otherwise, as Rinpoche was saying, the self is not my arm, it's not up my nose, it's not under my arm, so what? You can't find the self in the aggregates. To just leave it like that has no deep meaning at all. It's obvious. Yeah.
Thank you for this very thought-provoking discussion. I'm going to risk switching gears here a little bit. I've got a curiosity about Rinpoche's reincarnation of his predecessor. He seems to express doubt, not uncertainty.
Humility.
Humility, I suppose I'm hearing in there too, yes, humility. And that he's taken the throne, as he says, and your side is, there's no doubt you're the real deal. And I am curious how you know that.
Well, there are many levels to the answer of that, as is always the case. First of all, Rinpoche recognized me when he was 4 years old, when he came down to Dharamsala, and I went to see him. I wasn't there when he actually arrived. A few months later, I came back, and they asked him, do you know who this is? The attendant said, do you know who this is? And he said, don't be silly, of course I know who this is. And he was immediately affectionate and really warm and close with me, unlike the way he was with others. And it's continued, since then, a very, very strong feeling of a bond between us. And as he explained, I was the interpreter and secretary and disciple of the old one for 9 years. I was with him and nearly, most times, almost every day. There were some periods when he was in Nepal that I wasn't there. But, and he was, I had asked him to, I came from a very Harvard background. I was a very top student there, and I was very arrogant and had no social graces, and I asked him to make a donkey like me into a human. That's the traditional Tibetan Buddhist phrase that you use. So I used that phrase, and you make a contract, and the contract is that I'm never going to get angry with you, and I never, after that, he mercilessly pointed out whenever I was acting like an idiot, and his name for me was Dummy. That's what he called me all the time, and it was accurate, because I was acting like an idiot. And it didn't matter, in front of 1,000 people like that, which was very good preparation for translating for His Holiness, because I've had the experience of I'm translating in front of 10,000 people. His Holiness goes, ha, 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 he just made a mistake. And you have to continue. So my point being that I never ever got angry with him, not even for one moment. That's this close bond. And he pointed out that in this lifetime, because you mercilessly quizzed him about, don't and doesn't, I did about arithmetic. And he said as much as it, was very frustrating for him because he's hopeless with arithmetic, as was the last one, the previous one, he never ever got angry with me. So there's that thing. But when you talk about, and what he says is that he doesn't know whether he is, the actual incarnation or not. But we've watched movies of him teaching, and he would say to me, I remember saying that. Put that aside. He takes full responsibility to continue the work of his predecessor. So he accepts that role and, accepts the fact that he has this incredible opportunity of the best teachers, personal guidance from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, access to him, all the time. Incredible, rebirth. And he will take advantage of it, and he wants very much to reconnect with the students of the previous predecessor and carry on his work. So that's indicative. But also when you talk about rebirth, you have to understand that it's not linear in the sense of it's not that it's just the previous lifetime that is continuing into this lifetime. There's beginningless rebirths. So there's a huge store of potentials. And the cluster that's going to be activated for the next lifetime is not the same cluster that is from this lifetime. It's going to be a different mixture. But there will be certain aspects which are similar, which are the same, and this I can see in him. And he, the last one was one of the master debate partners of His Holiness. What does Rinpoche love? He loves debate. He started a Circling Institute for debate and logic that is, very consistent. Has tremendous sense of humor, extremely personable, doesn't like, to be treated, holy all the time, and so on. There are many characteristics that are similar and many characteristics that are different. But I can see the continuity, and the continuity of our relationship is very clear. It's different because of the age difference, but it's there. So I'm quite convinced. I mean, what it has done for me personally is, put me over the line, because as a Westerner, we are critical of reincarnation. But, this has convinced me fully that because I think that I understand a little bit better what it means, to know somebody in 2 lifetimes, as I have with Ling Rinpoche. Not as well as with Circle Rinpoche, but also I was a translator for the old Ling Rinpoche, and I've had some acquaintance with the new Ling Rinpoche. So, like that. There's only 15 minutes left before dinner, so I don't know if... Okay. You go question, or you're going to break into chanting?
Question, not dedication yet. Let me see, the liberating path and the ripening path, I wasn't quite sure what Rinpoche was referring to when he was mentioning that. Do you...
Oh, in the path of seeing, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the path of seeing, when you talk about the 16 moments of the path of seeing, you have the ripening paths. What you're getting rid of are the disturbing emotions associated with each of the Four Noble Truths in either the desire realm or in the form and formless realms. And you are getting rid... Am I wrong? So the ripening path is when you apply the opponent, and the liberated path is when you've gotten rid of it.
Yes, I'm trying to say, you might understand it better.
Into the microphone.
Yes, what he says is ripening path is what we call uninterrupted path.
That's a different... That is another terminology for it. Those are synonyms. Those are synonyms. The uninterrupted path and the liberated path. That's also called the ripening path. And the everything has many names, and each name has many definitions. So that doesn't make it easy.
Okay, thank you. So was Rinpoche's point was that we just want to get to the end, but not interested in all the work that leads up to it?
Right, that was his point, that we just want the to be free, and we don't want to put in the work to apply the opponents. Okay. That was his point. Also, you should know about the tenet systems. Each of the 4 Tibetan schools has different presentations of the Indian 4 tenet systems. So, welcome to the world of Tibetan Buddhism. The 4 Tibetan schools have a different understanding of the 4 Indian tenets. Prasangika, for instance, they say, doesn't make any positive assertions, and the view of Svatantrika and Prasangika is the same. Okay, so now you can do the dedication, and thank you for your patience.
Attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.